Blog Talk Radio.
Paranormal Review Radio.
Hello and welcome, everyone. It is Friday night, and you're listening to Paranormal Review Radio, the only radio show without commercials and with more great paranormal talk. Thank you all for joining us tonight. I'm Anthony Agati in New York.
And I'm Lucy Liebfried in Chicago. Put the kids in bed and get comfy because you're about to have a Paranormal Friday night. Welcome, friends, family, fellow investigators, and those who are new to the field. Do you have a question to ask us or a story to tell? Well, don't worry. You have two ways to be heard. Call into the show and be on the air live by dialing 661-244-9831. Press the number 1 to get your call in queue, or you can type your question in the chat room. Now, Anthony and I will be referring to them during the show. And if you're listening on the archives or on YouTube, well, make sure you get here on Friday nights live. Now, when you're not listening to us, you can check out our Facebook page, our YouTube channel for some cool articles, videos, show highlights, and promotions. And if that's not enough, you can always drop us a line at paranormal.review@aol.com. Okay, guys, it's time for Paranormal Review Radio.
All right, it's late at night, and you just laid down on your bed for a much-needed night of rest. As you're about to rest your eyes and sail away to dreamland, you notice a black figure glide across the inside of your window, blocking a portion of the moonlight shining through. What was that, you ask? But think nothing of it, and when you try to blow away the thoughts of anything paranormal, you see it again. This time it looks more like a figure than just an imaginary blip. Is that what they call a shadow person? Tales of walking shadows come from across the world. Some of these shadow people wander through the periphery of our lives. Others stay for years. People can rarely make out features of these darker-than-night, human-shaped entities other than an occasional set of blazing red eyes. Shadow people often appear dressed as a medieval monk, wearing a fedora, or bald and sexless. These entities may simply trek through our bedroom at night, never to be seen again, while others may lurk in doorways just watching, day after day. Still others attack with energy-draining fear. Our guest tonight has written about and interviewed many people who have experienced this phenomenon, and tonight we'll get to understand a little bit more of this elusive paranormal experience. Jason Offutt is an instructor at a Missouri college teaching journalism and has written many paranormal and non-paranormal books in his lifetime, including the awesome book Darkness Walks, The Shadow People Among Us. I'm sure there are many people listening right now who have had some sort of experience with shadow people, but never thought anything more than just a spirit. But what if there is more to these dark whispers in the night? Let's find out and hopefully answer your questions. Please help me in welcoming Mr. Jason Offutt to the show. Hi, Jason. Thanks for coming on the show tonight.
Hey, thanks for the invitation. I'm really happy to be on.
Great.
Welcome, Jason. You know what? You worked in mainstream media, and, the chance to write anything paranormal is like slim to none. When did you first get interested in the paranormal, and how did you cross over from mainstream to write about it?
Well, I'll tackle the win first. I grew up in a 120-year-old schoolhouse, an old country schoolhouse, and I was always, as a kid, hearing strange noises and Dad would, of course, say, "Oh, it's just the house settling." One afternoon, I remember it was like a Saturday afternoon. It was bright and sunny. I walked out of my bedroom, went into the hallway to get a book, and there was a kid in there. And we lived way out in the country, and there weren't any kids around, so I have no idea how this kid showed up. And then I noticed something really strange about him. I could see the bookshelf through him. I can still see the kid right now. Gosh, thinking about it, it's been decades ago. He had brown hair, parted on one side. He's wearing a blue flannel shirt and blue jeans. And I saw this ghost, and I just stared at it, and it stared back at me. I have no idea how long that happened, but it blinked at one point, and that broke the little trance I was in, staring at it. And I turned around and walked into my room and shut the door, and then I didn't talk to anybody about it for many years. But that really got me interested in the paranormal. I realized that there's something out there that science doesn't know about, and I really wanted to find out about it. Going from that to the mainstream journalism question, yeah, mainstream journalism really frowns on writing about the paranormal, and I didn't get a chance to write about anything paranormal until I left the field and started teaching journalism at a university, and I got a lot more freedom, so I was able to, instead of write about city council meetings, I can write about whatever I want to. And darn it, I want to write about the paranormal because I'd love to find out what's going on.
Well, you know what? Tonight's about shadow people. And we've discussed this before on the show, but you know what? It seems that the more people you talk to, the more opinions and the more theories arise. In general, with all that you've studied and talked to, what is your theory on what shadow people are? For my book and numerous articles that I've written about shadow people, I've determined that shadow people aren't just one thing. There's not just one entity that is a shadow person. There are so many different behaviors with shadow people that it really can't just be one thing, in my opinion. I think that there are a number of different types of entities that just happen to look similar. So they're all lumped together under the shadow people umbrella. Okay.
So as what they are, well, you'd ask what they are. So I mean, what they could be is I think a lot of shadow people are just simply ghosts, because a lot of the reports that I've gotten from people they behave like residual ghosts. One lady in particular I interviewed had a shadow person that would do the same thing. It would walk down the steps from the second floor to the ground floor, turn the corner, and walk into the kitchen and disappear. It didn't do it with any regularity. I mean, it didn't do it at 7 o'clock every night, but it would do it enough to where she noticed it a lot, and that's what a residual ghost does. Maybe that's all the energy it could manifest to appear as this dark figure. I think there are also evil entities out there that look like shadow people that we'll get into in a bit. There's also, in my opinion, some of these sightings are potentially people from a different dimension. They're in a spot that's a little bit thin, and they bled over into ours, and that's really all that we can see is a shadow of them.
Well, you know what? In your book, you do come up with some different descriptions that people have given you. What are some of these descriptions that you've come across in your research on the different types of shadow people?
Okay, one which is the if you're going to encounter one, this is the one you want to encounter, is what I've called the benign shadow, and that's a shadow person that doesn't that doesn't notice you. It simply walks by, walks past you, walks through a room, walks down the street in broad daylight, you might be the only one to see it, but it doesn't take any interest in you whatsoever. There are shadow people encounters that do take an interest in people. These are usually shadows that have blazing red eyes. Sometimes they're wearing a fedora. That's called that type of shadow entity is called the Hat Man. And these entities not only take a notice of you, they strike some sort of fear in the person that sees them, and an unnatural type fear. The people told me it felt like they were dredging this fear up to feed off of it. There are also other shadow entities that seem to just watch. Lots of people I've spoken with have woken up, and there's been a shadow person looming over their bed, staring at them. They've been, as kids, they remember playing on the floor in their bedroom, and they felt like they were being watched, and looked up, and there was a shadow entity standing in the, leaning into the doorway, just staring at them. And all of these shadow entities that watch, whenever they notice that they're being watched, they seem to get scared and run off. So, I mean, the different types of behavior are, wildly different.
Well, Jason, if there are so many descriptions for shadow people, and I know people are thinking about this. Actually, there's one person in chat that brought up a similar question to what I'm going to ask you now. If there's so many descriptions and there's so many variables within the shadow people category, what makes them so different than just a regular apparition or a regular spirit? Is it just because of the dark-natured presence that they create, or is there something else that differentiates the two, or the idea that a shadow person is different than any other spirit entity?
Well, again, like I said, some descriptions of shadow people, I'm convinced that they're ghosts. They're a spirit that is walking the earth, and that's how they manifest themselves. Some appear, this darker than night human-shaped shadow, because that's terrifying. The shape is just terrifying. Maybe they intend to look like that just to strike fear in people. And others just, that's just how they look. I think a lot of them are just spirits, but a lot of them are other things. For my book, I interviewed experts in Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, and American Indian shamanism, and they all had these dark shadow figures in these religions. And so this has been around for a really, really long time, and everybody from around the world, all these different religions, from around the world have these in their belief system. So there is something going on, whether it be ghosts, or in Christianity, demons, in Islam, the jinn, in American Indian shamanism, they're medicine people who have used their abilities for greed and have morphed into something dark and evil. It's no matter what it is, these things turn out to be something fairly wicked.
Some of what the sciences actually say about this phenomenon can be easily dismissed as, sleep paralysis. Everybody's heard about that. Chemical imbalance in the brain, or even like the light and dark trickery of the eye. Do you feel that many of the shadow people cases that maybe you've come across can be dismissed? And is there one story that you know of that sort of has broken through those tests, either the standard test or maybe the test that you've set forward in determining which one could be true and which one could be false, and still have no other explanation other than paranormal?
Yes, absolutely. What you were talking about, the sleep paralysis, is a science calls it a hypnagogic state, which whenever we go to sleep and we're in a deep REM sleep, our body our brain pumps our body full of chemicals that basically temporarily paralyzes us. And that's because if it didn't, our involuntary muscle twitches would keep us awake all night. So here we are, paralyzed, we're dreaming, something happens to wake us up. And in our waking, still kind of REM state, we can see the world around us, but we also have elements of the dream within our sight, in our mind, and we're paralyzed. So a lot of cases, probably most, have to do with that. In my book, Darkness Walks, I interviewed a lot more people than made it into the book. And the ones that I was convinced were simply having a hypnagogic dream, a waking paralyzed dream, I left those out. The rest of them, either I'm convinced or I'm convinced the people who've experienced something are convinced that they did. Being a long-time journalist, I got a pretty good BS detector, so I think I'm pretty solid on that. But you were asking about a case that would prove this. I interviewed a guy who, when he was 20 years old, he was at his parents' house. He was alone, and it was in the middle of the day, and he noticed noticed something was wrong. He felt something was wrong, and he was reading in the living room, and he looked up, and there was a hat man leaning through the doorway, staring at him. And the doorway went to the kitchen, and this guy looked up and saw it, and the hat man saw him, and he said the hat man looked like he panicked and turned and ran, and he heard a crash from the kitchen. Well, of course, he got up and ran in there, and the back door, the sliding back door, was double paned. The interior pane of the door was shattered. The exterior pane was intact. And he said he got there in time to see the shadow man jump off the back deck. And the back deck was like 20 feet off the ground. And he ran out there and looked, and of course he couldn't see anything, but he had that evidence that it ran through a double pane door and shattered one.
So that's an amazing story. I mean, for a shadow person entity, or even just a spirit entity, to be able to manifest that way and have some sort of physical form to be able to interact physically, in your presence, is an amazing story, and believable to me. I mean, I would believe that. You had mentioned earlier about having that sort of really good bullshit meter on stories.
So we can say bullshit. Great. Okay.
We can say bullshit here.
We can say anything, Jason.
All right. Okay.
You're free to talk however you like, Jason.
Don't tell me that.
But you mentioned that it's you're thankful that you have that. What is like a typical story that you could sort of pick right off the bat that is really almost laughable to you?
Well, I wouldn't consider this. Okay, I'll get to laughable in a second. The ones that I pick out and not to use are the ones, like I said, that are I can tell that it's basically, this is the old hag syndrome. It's hypnagogia. It looks real, but it's really not. It's telltale signs. The ones that really, really seem unbelievable, it's not the story that's unbelievable, it's the person that's telling it's unbelievable.
Right.
Because if somebody tells me, I saw a ghost and it freaked me out, or I saw, Bigfoot in the woods and it scared the hell out of me, or I saw a UFO and it did this, I'll listen to them, absolutely, because I've seen stuff in the sky as well I can't explain. But if somebody tells me, I've seen a ghost, okay, I've been aboard a UFO, I've had lunch with Bigfoot, and I've given JFK a back rub. You know what? No, shut up. You didn't. You didn't do that stuff at all. And it's amazing how many people who make claims like that.
Yeah.
Well, okay, you know what? You've studied and you've researched almost every paranormal topic out there. And, you just mentioned Bigfoot, UFOs, and even telekinesis in animals. How do you feel the paranormal field is viewed from the outside world or even scientists?
I teach at a university, and I have a great opportunity. This is terrific. a great opportunity to actually talk to scientists, to sit down and have beer with scientists. And I've got a couple of friends over in the physics and chemistry department that I have talks with. They are big paranormal enthusiasts. And they've said, if somebody's going to discover, and be able to prove the paranormal, it's people like us. Because people are going to believe us. We're PhDs in physics. Okay? This is what's going to happen. And I actually wrote an article recently for Mysterious Universe, and I got some praise and I also got some flack for it, because it was basically on that line that everybody out there on the weekends going out ghost hunting, going out Bigfoot hunting, no matter what they're doing, whatever evidence they find, even if it is 100% goddamn truth, it doesn't matter. Because they're not PhD scientists, they're not accredited, they didn't use the science, even if they use the scientific method, they're not accredited scientists, so nobody's going to pay attention to it. Which, I mean, it's sad, but it's true, because I've seen some great pictures, I've heard some amazing EVPs, I've experienced some amazing EVPs myself that, that was true. I asked a question. Something that wasn't there, I couldn't see, responded to it. But you know what? If I was somebody else, I wouldn't believe that happened.
Well, you know what gets me a little upset is the fact that science, it really has a limited knowledge of the surroundings, of everything around us. I mean, they do know a lot, and they've done tests, and they've had their theories tested and either proven or disproven, but they don't know a whole hell of a lot about the universe. They still don't even know why we dream, and so to say that what happens after death is X, and until proven otherwise, they won't believe anything else. To me, that's being closed-minded and not having that scientific feeling or mode of operation in wanting to learn, in trying to discover. To me, that's just shutting the door on that whole thing.
Oh, and I agree completely. I agree with that. Science, to some extent, is more of a religion than it is science, because it requires a lot of belief. The Big Bang Theory, really? Not the TV show, good God.
Right.
The theory, I mean, that's done with math. Okay, great. You've studied some stuff, you threw some math together, and this is what you came up with. How do you know? You don't. But that's the accepted scientific principle, that's how the universe began. Okay? Why? I mean, I've always wondered, why does the universe have to have a beginning? Okay? Maybe it's just always been here, but we have to in our heads think that it has a beginning, because we have a beginning. We're born, we get old, we die. We have years go by. We've got sun up, we got sundown. We got seasons to go by. Everything's got a beginning and an ending. So we had to come up with something. I'm not saying the Big Bang Theory is wrong. It could be right, but the point is that it could be completely wrong. But it's the accepted scientific principle, and if you say it's wrong, people laugh at you. Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't want to. I'm sorry, Lucy. I don't want to get off on a tangent, but I did want to mention this. We talked about this on a previous show about life on other planets and the possibilities of it, and going through sort of the history and the evidence and so on and so forth. And one of the things that really bothered me was the idea that science right now is looking for life on other planets by the means of life on this existing planet, meaning they're looking for liquid water, they're looking for some sort of oxygen, whatever sustains the life that they know of right here. But my question is, first of all, we don't know all of the elements that are out there in the universe. We don't know what else could have been created, even if the Big Bang did occur. We don't know what other molecules and what other atoms and what other whatever is out there that could sustain and create life. So why are we, again, limiting ourselves and creating that narrow mind to only focus on that? Maybe there's other chemicals out there that can create and sustain life. And I think they're actually starting to figure that out, I think. But I think in the back of their mind, they're sort of pushing it, into the dark realm of maybe even the shadow people. Who knows?
Well, yeah, but the thing is that they're going with what they know about. and they're looking
Right.
for silicon-based life, or not, I mean silicon, but carbon-based life. I mean, Star Trek had back in 1967, I think it was the second season, an entity that was silicon-based life, and they were all wowing over that. You know, I mean, it's not everything. You know, what you're saying is, you know, on Earth, I mean, it might be completely different based on something we can't even recognize. So
Right.
we got to go with what we know. I mean, we can't just start guessing.
Right.
Well, you know, on the scientific side, I mean, in order for scientists to accept something, there has to be all these parameters and that. But in my mind, what you've done, you've interviewed different people. You've compiled all these experiences. A theory is a theory, but an actual definition has to come from somewhere. So everything that all these experiences that you've compiled, I mean, shouldn't this be the basis to start somewhere? I mean, it's like scientists, you got to have the math, you know, it's got to add up. A's got to equal B and turn into C. It just seems like the paranormal world is all of these things that are happening, but yet we don't have a set, you know, for science to accept it, we don't have an what am I trying to say? A recipe.
Right, and here's why. When I was doing my book on shadow people, you know, I was interviewing one of my scientist friends, and I was describing the different ways shadow people have interacted with the world around them, and shadow people have walked through doors. Shadow people have also turned door handles. They've, you know, running through the double pane glass door I was talking about. It crushed one and ran through the other one. They've been able to, you know, in one case, a woman in Australia got assaulted by one. You know, so it can do these things, and explaining these things to this physicist, he was like, okay, given the laws of physics, that can't happen. It can't be non-corporeal and, you know, exert force on physical things. Given our physics, it can't do that. Now, he said that he believed that stuff could happen, you know, not on a scientific level, but, you know, on a spiritual type level, but, you know, scientifically, no, they can't happen, and that's what's going on. If anything, this is my opinion. If anything in the paranormal world is going to be proven, it's going to be some cryptid, Bigfoot getting shot by a hunter. Then you've got a body that you can cut into, and there, boom, you got it. When it comes to ghosts, when it comes to shadow people, in the scientific method, they have to be able to observe data. They have to be able to repeat that observation. And you can't repeat that observation when it comes to shadow people or ghosts or even UFOs that you see in the night sky.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know what? In the descriptions, you know, the red-eyed shadow people, they seem to be demonic in nature. But, I mean, anything with red eyes must be evil. So can you tell us what you found in regards to these red-eyed entities, and are they evil?
Well, yes. I'm just going to say from the interviews I've had with people who have encountered them, because the red-eyed shadow people tend to be the type of shadow people who people will see looming over their bed, or, you know, threatening, you know, appearing threatening in a darkened hallway, and they feel like this entity is generating, you know, an exorbitant amount of fear inside them, and that they are feeding off of it. And the people usually feel fairly drained after dealing with these shadow people. I talked with one woman. She was eight months pregnant, and her and her husband lived on the second floor. They lived in an old house, and, well, you're 8 months pregnant, you go to the bathroom a lot. So in the middle of the night, she was on the toilet, had the door opened to the bathroom, and the only light was a street light coming in through the window at the end of the hall. And she saw two red eyes. and it was about the height of a large dog. And the hallway was dark, so she couldn't make anything else out. But they kept getting bigger and bigger and coming closer and coming closer. And she said that the fear that gripped her was indescribable. And she screamed for her husband to turn the light off or turn the light on in the hallway, and nothing was there. But there was nothing out the window for her, for any lights to be coming, for brake lights to be coming, because they were up on the second floor, and she didn't know what it was. But the terror she experienced was horrific.
Mhm. Well, it almost sounds kind of like the experiences people have with black-eyed kids. But you know what? We have a caller in queue. If you want to take a call right now, are you okay with that, Jason?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay. Hold on one second. Let's go. It's area code 832. Hi, you're on the air with Anthony, Lucy, and Jason. Who is this?
Hello.
Hi, who is this?
Hi, Lucy. This is Tato.
Hi.
How are you?
Okay.
I just
You
wanted
got a
to give
question
you guys.
for Jason?
I actually did. Something happened to my grandma. A little while ago. Well, this was a long time, but she told me a little while ago. She was in her home. This was back home in Ecuador, and she was playing around with her sister. It was very late at night, and she said that she saw a shadow dragging some banana leaves through her house, and that woke them up, obviously. And as soon as they kind of screamed and started running for everyone to kind of hear what they were seeing, the whole thing just disappeared all of a sudden. So, again, I did not experience this myself, but my grandma said that she did with her little sister. I just wanted to perhaps relate to the subject that you guys are talking about.
Well, Jason, when you were doing research, Jason, had you ever encountered a story where an actual shadow person was, besides the story that you mentioned earlier about breaking through the window, anything other where it interacted physically with the environment?
There aren't many, but yes, I have. Shadow people opening doors. I'd mentioned a woman, I think I did, a woman in Australia who was physically assaulted by one. Those cases are fairly rare. I mean, but they do happen. They have happened. I've talked to people who've been, who had handprints, bruise-shaped handprints on their arms where they've been grabbed by a shadow person. So, yes, dragging banana leaves across the floor. Yes, I mean that would fit into some of the things that I've researched. Which is one thing about shadow people that's really, if they can do that and walk through walls, that is troublesome.
Yeah. Would you say that type of entity, as Tara was talking about, again, physically messing around with the environment, would it have created more energy, obviously, to manifest itself, to create that energy and able to interact physically, be more evil in nature, or it doesn't really matter?
I don't have an answer for that. Looking at all the cases that I've covered, usually the cases that I've gotten where people or the environment has physically been touched or moved or attacked have been negative entities. I mean, maybe the entities that aren't as negative don't feel the need to throw open doors or break windows.
Right.
Wow. Okay, Tato, thank you so much for giving us a call.
Thank you, guys. Thank you very much.
Okay, bye-bye.
Yeah, Jason, we talked, or you had talked earlier and mentioned the Hat Man shadow person. And it seems, that a spirit wearing something, a hat or scarf or jacket, may be silly to some people, and the possibility is that it may just be the blur of that figure, and our mind may be creating the hat because we're trying to associate something that we're familiar with. Do you think that there are actual shadow entities wearing physical things, or can it be just a manifestation of our mind creating that hat? I mean, has a storyteller ever told you that somebody took off their hat and maybe bowed down to them or something, that where they can actually physically know that it was a hat being worn?
Oh no, and when it comes to the hat, I don't think it's a physical hat that people are seeing. I think it's as non-corporeal as the shadow entity itself.
Mm-hmm. So it's just like a silhouette, basically, of the object.
Right, and I've gotten I've talked to people from as far away as Brazil and Australia who've seen this Hat Man entity, which looks like a guy in a 1940s business suit wearing a fedora. This type of entity has. I'm going to tell you two quick stories about one interacting with people. And I talked with a guy, and I actually know him. He was a former student of mine, and he said he and a friend were playing tennis at midnight, because that's what college students do. Why not? Let's go at midnight and play tennis. And there was a dumpster on the other, right outside, the tennis courts. And have you seen? There are places here that have these. I don't know if they're in Chicago or New York, but it's like
is it the cowboy thing?
A cut out of a cowboy.
Yeah, yes.
And there was one leaning against the dumpster, and this guy thought somebody threw one away because they're tacky, right? And they played tennis, and it was there, and they were about finished, and he said he looked over, and the thing stood straight and walked off.
Yeah.
There was also, this is a little bit more interaction. I spoke with a guy who grew up in a small town in Iowa, and he and his brother lived in the basement. They had a finished basement, and in the room where they lived, they had something that they called the cowboy. And it was a guy wearing a fedora, but they were kids, and they thought it looked more like a cowboy hat. And he would appear at night and walk back and forth. And in one part of the room, it's like he couldn't come any farther closer to the bed than this one area of the room. And he came so often they got used to him, but he would just pace. And they said it looked like he was kind of angry about something. And when the guy moved out, he thought he was done. He's grown up here. I'm going to college. I'm done with this cowboy. And he started seeing it at college in his room, which started really freaking him out. And one day it just stopped. And he didn't see it for 2 years. And he went to, he was in Nebraska, which where I am in Missouri, Nebraska is not that far away. He was in Nebraska because his girlfriend lived there, and he'd driven to a mall to get something for her, and his car broke down. And he was on the phone talking to his mom, and all of a sudden he realized that there was somebody standing outside his window. And it was in the middle of the day. And he turned to look who was standing out, see who was looking at, who's standing outside his window, and it was the cowboy. Black, cut out, human-shaped figure, middle of the day, standing in a parking lot outside his window, and he said it tapped his window twice and then faded out. And he was convinced that this thing just showed up to let him know that it was still hanging around.
I just got chills.
Well, I've done a lot of research on this topic. Like Lucy was mentioning earlier, we had done a show on this before. Certainly not experts in this field at all, to say the least. But is there anything in the interviews that you've done, and between the book and the research and all the work that you've put into shadow people, in addition to every other paranormal topic out there, but specifically with shadow people, is there anything that you can share with us or our listeners that they may turn around and say, wow, you know what, I've never heard that before about shadow people, or maybe even spirits in general? Is there anything that you've come across that maybe has blown you away that you sort of never knew about before, but are starting to think that there may be something to this?
Well, I can tell you something that a couple of people told me that kind of blew me away, and I included it in my book. I don't. This is one of the things that I'm not saying. I think this is real, but I had more than one person talk to me about it, and it was really strange. These couple of people I interviewed, and they're completely disconnected. I mean, they were from different countries who told me these stories that were eerily similar, that they had continuous shadow people encounters. And at one point during one of their encounters, the cloak, the veil, split. They could see what was underneath the shadow, and it looked like a reptile.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
Again, I just interviewed two people who told me that story. I'm throwing it out there because you asked if somebody told me something that blew me away, and that was kind of it. I'm really not including that in the whole shadow person mythos, but that's I guess part of it.
And those were the only two people that told you this type of story. You hadn't heard that from any other or similar type from any other resident?
Just two people, and they were just amazingly similar stories.
Wow.
Well, you know what?
I hate saying reptiles because I don't want to be one of those people about reptilians are controlling the world. I'm not one of those people.
Right.
I don't think reptilians are controlling the world. I'm just sharing what other people told me.
Well, okay, so my next question, I mean, it kind of leads to this because one of the things that I've heard is that these beings or these entities, they could possibly be time travelers or even possible aliens coming down to stalk and investigate our species. So, I mean, with these two experiences, I mean, do you feel there's any credibility to that kind of thinking?
About extraterrestrials, or I mean,
yeah,
there are many accounts of watchers. I hate to use that term because it means something specific, but of shadow people who watch other people, who stare at them, and when they're found out that they're being observed, that they get panicked and run away. But there are plenty encounters of shadow people watching and observing humanity. What that means, I'm not sure. Well, there was a girl that was in my department. She was a student in my department, and she had this happen to her. In her dorm room, she lived by herself. She had a loft, so she was about 5.5 to 6 feet off the ground, and she kept feeling, whenever she went to bed, she kept feeling that she wasn't alone, and she would often hear her computer, her laptop that she left up, close. And when she turned the light on, it would be, up where she left it. But more than one night, she would, be laying in bed and feel like somebody was there, and she would look up, and there would be a shadow entity just standing over her bed staring at her. And, what's going on? What are you doing? Are you trying to creep her out, or are you watching her and, trying to figure out what she is, or, what her behavior is going to be?
Right.
Well, okay, so another thing that I had read about was when you wanting to confront or interact with the shadow people, it kind of, you want to create a positive communication or a feeling when a shadow entity has been experienced. But even down to the obvious praying, but more interesting laughter may cause them to leave. Personally, I can't picture myself laughing hysterically when I see one, but, is there a cure or some kind of method to get rid of the dark beings?
Yeah, I really hate it when I get emails from people who are like, Jason, can you help me? I've got this going on. Can you make it go away? Because I'm a journalist. Okay, I'm not a shaman. I'm not an exorcist. I'm a guy who interviews people, who does research, and who reports on those interviews and research. But I do have a chapter in my book about that, because there were so many people who told me, their tales of being, haunted by shadow people, and when they prayed out loud, when they sang, or laughed, did something verbal and did something positive, the laughter, the praying, the singing, that the shadow people left and they didn't see them anymore. So there's probably something to that. And there are other entities that are like that. Even to the point, I've read that there were encounters with grays where people started praying and the grays went away. I have no idea about the validity of any of that, but that's something that I've read.
Well, I mean, it's an interesting concept. Everybody always talks about how, the good always wins over evil. And being in the light is you cast your light into the shadow, and therefore the good will prevail. It makes sense to have that level of that mindset and that preparedness and that procedure. It's just interesting to I guess try and being in that situation. I don't think anybody would even think of that first, to have a positive talk with a shadow spirit or even laughter. I mean, it's almost weird to even say that, but.
Well, and it's not a talk with the shadow person. I wouldn't encourage anyone to actually try and engage one in conversation. It's in response to them actually being there, which, I'm planning on busting into putting on the Ritz if I ever see one. But, from Young Frankenstein. Yeah.
Right.
But, but with the conversation, I wouldn't encourage that at all, because a lot of these encounters have been negative. Christians are going to call them demons, and maybe some of them are. I mean, I don't know, but there have been cases where people have tried to converse with them, and it has always ended up bad.
Right. As people who are listening to the show tonight, if you are an avid listener, you know pretty much how I like to get a little bit deeper into the topics that we talk about. And again, in doing research for the show, I go online as part of my research. I'll go online and I'll Google things. And when you go online and you have one topic that you are starting off with, and then click after click and backspace click after click, you end up, in something completely different. And so when I typed in ancient shadow people, I started to click through and I went through all of these different sites, and then I came across sites that were talking about the Egyptian culture. And within ancient Egyptian philosophy, I learned that there are 5 parts, and I don't know if you know about this, Jason, that there are 5 parts to a human soul: the heart, the name, the soul, the spirit, and the shadow. And when I was reading about the shadow portion, it explained it as the one part of the soul that's always existed, and that we could not have a body without the shadow soul. And it seems that this shadow soul contains the things that, we may feel that are sort of part of our thoughts or actions that we may not be sort of proud of. Maybe sort of the things that we did in our past is represented in this shadow figure. And just for this little blurb that I just talked about, could the Egyptians have some sort of understanding of shadow people, and that they are a representation of us that we have yet to sort of refresh and maybe clean or possibly work through before heading into the afterlife, and therefore that's what we're seeing in these encounters and these experiences?
Well, yes, I would say absolutely, and that is similar to when I was speaking with an expert on Hinduism. That was similar to something that he had said, that if seeing these entities, they are souls that are waiting around for another incarnation, because they still have some things to work out. And if we see them, I mean, that's the spirit. That's them waiting. So that's fairly similar to what you'd said.
Great, I didn't even know that. Lucy and I have talked about this web or this invisible thread that seems to be connected through all the paranormal areas, from Bigfoot to UFO and ghosts. And this may sound crazy, but do you feel that the spirits and these shadow people are also connected, and we sort of touched on it a little bit before, but do you feel that they're connected in some way to the other phenomenon like black-eyed kids and Bigfoot? Do you think that there's sort of a weave through all of this?
It's the paranormal theory of everything.
Right.
Yeah, with shadow people, no. I mean, I think there is. There is a weave there through certain aspects of the paranormal, with especially ghosts and demonic entities, jinn. Those things, I think, they all fit kind of in the same category. When it comes to Bigfoot and UFOs and everything else, no, I and black-eyed kids, I don't think it really fits. I've done a whole lot of research and writing on black-eyed kids, and they're an animal all to themselves.
Well, again, I try and figure out a lot of different things within the paranormal, and obviously one of the things that came to mind when the vision of shadow people came up was Grim Reaper. It's in a black cloak. It's standing there with the Sith. Could these shadow people, and this may sound funny, be connected in some way to the Grim Reaper, meaning that when a person sees a shadow person, that it may be some sort of sign that death is to come, or that death may be coming in their life in some way or somehow and in some form?
Absolutely, yeah, yes, and this would probably would account for the symbol of the Grim Reaper. There have been a lot of shadow people accounts that I've had that have been in a monk's cowl. Okay, this just black figure in a monk's cowl, and I've interviewed a few people who have seen them in relation to death. One woman kept seeing. She lived in an apartment, and she kept seeing this shadow figure in a monk's cowl standing across the street next to a lamppost. And he wouldn't be there all the time, but every once in a while she'd look out and he'd be standing there, and she felt like he was watching the neighbor's house, and her neighbor was elderly and sick. And one day when her neighbor died, she came home and there was an ambulance out front, and her neighbor died. She never saw that shadow figure again. So she was pretty convinced she saw the Grim Reaper. And if she saw it, who's to say that people 1,000 years ago didn't see exactly the same thing? And that's how we got that archetype.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know what? I do have a question. Out of all these experiences you've heard and compiled, has there ever been a positive experience when a shadow person is around?
Yeah, that's no. Except I can only really think of one case. There's a guy, I can't remember his name, but he lives close to St. Louis. He lives in Missouri, and he's in theater. And one night, he and some friends had a Ouija board, and they were, which I recommend, please do not use one. Anyway, they were using this Ouija board, and they had contacted something, and the something that they contacted stayed in the house, and it was dark and it was violent as to it would knock things over, and he felt threatened by it. But ever since he and his mom moved into the house, they had a shadow figure. In fact, it was a hat man who was in the house. They saw it so often, they named it George. And George, he felt that George, whenever this entity that he called up through the Ouija board, whenever it was around, George would show up, and he felt that George was protecting him from that entity that he'd called up. That's about the only positive shadow person encounter that I can think of.
Okay. Well,
I guess
you know what?
Shadow people.
Well, you know what? out of all the accounts that you have compiled, has there been one that really stood out for you or actually frightened you?
Frightened? I don't really frighten easy. The one that disturbed me, a woman from Sydney, Australia, her and her roommate were going to sleep. Her roommate fell asleep before she did, and she was lying in bed, and then she started to feel uncomfortable, and there was a shadow man standing in the doorway, and she started to get panicky, but she really couldn't move, and the thing came on, over to the bed and started sexually assaulting her. And she tried to scream, she tried to fight it off, and she couldn't. And eventually she was able to make enough noise to wake her roommate up, who looked over and saw what was happening and screamed, and then the thing just disappeared. I mean, what are you laughing about? That's horrible.
This is like creepy to me. It's like,
well, of course it's creepy. It's terrible, and it's again. But there was a vocalization, and when there was a vocalization, it wasn't a positive one. It was a scream, but the thing disappeared. But two people saw this. One person physically experienced it. The other one saw it. And that's the experience that really bothers me, because of the nature of it and the fact that it was physical.
So, bottom line, are we any closer to figuring out what shadow people are, or are we still in the dark?
Well, again, as we talked about with the paranormal, I think we're always going to be in the dark until science hammers everything out, which they're not going to do. But I think shadow people are a lot of different things that just look alike. I think some of them are ghosts. I think some of them are demonic entities. I think some of them are, maybe there's, weak spots between physical dimensions. And sometimes shadow people that just walk through the room are people from a different dimension, and that's all we can see through the through the ether. I think there are a lot of different things.
Well, you know what, Jason, we have been amazed by you tonight, and we must have you back on the show to talk about other paranormal stuff. But in the meantime, where can our listeners go to learn more about you? And do you have any conferences or events coming up that you want to share with us?
I just spoke at a conference a month ago. I have a time machine, so we could work out a time to go back.
Okay.
Maybe we can talk about my time machine the next time I'm on the show.
Excellent.
So I'm not going to be on a conference at a conference for a while. I have a blog. It's called From the Shadows, from-the-shadows.blogspot.com. I haven't posted anything for a while because I've got a contract to write a number of novels, so I'm working on those right now. But there's about 5 years worth of weekly content on that blog. Everything from time travel to Bigfoot to golems to gnome attacks to dogmen, shadow people, black-eyed kids. Almost every aspect of the paranormal you can think of is on my blog. There's also a link to my books, and they're all on Amazon.com. And that's a way to get a hold of me. My email address is on there as well. I'd love to hear from people.
Wait, Lucy, hold on 1 second. I just have one more last question. Because I just thought about it. We were thinking, Lucy and I have been thinking about doing a show on this. Elementals. Have you done any research or have you talked to anybody about elementals or fairies or anything of that nature?
I have I interviewed a Jewish exorcist from Kansas City, Missouri, who spoke with me about elementals, just very briefly. And he said they're nothing to be messed with. He said that he tried to drive what he called a leprechaun from a house out in Kansas, and it didn't end up very well. But that's about the extent of my knowledge.
It's a fascinating topic, and there's not so much history or research on it, other than the little people in wings, and it fascinates me to learn more about it, and I'm trying to go even further back in ancient history just to see if there's anything that a sort of starting point to go on, and that may be one of the topics that we talk about.
Okay, absolutely, and thinking about it, yes, please go to my blog that I mentioned and look up the Harlequin.
Oh, okay.
I've got a number of stories on the Harlequin, which is pretty terrifying, and that I'm pretty sure is an elemental.
And what was that website again?
from-the-shadows.blogspot.com.
Okay.
Okay, we'll post the link on our Facebook page.
Okay, terrific.
Okay. Well, ladies and gentlemen, go check out jasonoffutt.com. Look for more cool stuff from Jason. Jason, thank you again for coming on the show tonight. You know what? We really appreciate your honesty and the amazing stories.
All right, this has been terrific. I've had a great time, and you know what? T.J. Vaughn just said in the chat room, just finished Darkness Walks. It was very interesting. Thank you very much, T.J.
It's awesome. Thank you so much, Jason. We definitely do want to have you back on the show. And one of the other topics that I love to talk about, and I know one is with you, is the black-eyed kids. And people have always been emailing us and talking to us about getting another show on this, because I think we did one or two other shows before on that. I just love that topic, and so we'd love to have you back on to talk about that, maybe other things if you have time.
Oh, no, that would be terrific. And I've done an amazing amount of research on black-eyed kids, and I was compiling a book on it a few years ago, and my wife said, Jason, of all the stuff you write about, that's the one that scares me. So if you write a book and a black-eyed kid comes to our door, it's your ass. So being a person who knows when to pick his battles, I didn't write that book. But I still know, still done a lot of research, and I'd be happy to talk about it.
Awesome. Well, a happy wife is a happy life, right?
Exactly.
Well, Jason, you're welcome to come here and talk about it, okay?
All right, that's terrific.
Thank you, Jason, so much, and have a great weekend.
All right. Yeah, you as well.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Good night.
Bye.
Well, Lucy, as we were doing the interview, you sent me a note, which I didn't get until afterwards, because you had walked away from your headset, and you mentioned something was moving in the front room, and no one was home. What happened?
I'm just hearing stuff moving in the front room. Now, this has happened a couple times, like where one night the door, because I usually shut the door to my room here, and the doorknob had been moving one night. I mean, you heard it.
Yeah.
And now I heard movement in the front room, like something's moving, but nothing is out of place. And I went to go check. There's nobody home but me. And I don't know. It just seems like everyone, definitely know there's something here.
You have your windows open?
Just the bedroom window over here, but that didn't come from this side of the room. It came from the side where the front room is. Mm-hmm. So that's why I went out there to go take a look and make sure, maybe my son came home or something like that. But there's nothing out there. Now, I will say, as far as shadow people, I have seen a shadow person in this apartment. And I told you about that.
Mm-hmm.
It was during a time, and the situation, it was a very negative situation. The emotions that were running in the apartment were very, very sad, negative. And I'm sitting on the couch, and I'm looking, and I've got the front room light on, which is right next to me. Otherwise, it's not really a whole lot. I look out of the corner of my eye, I see the shape of a person walk from my front hallway towards the second bedroom. I get up right away to go look. There's nothing there. And I've been on enough investigations. I've seen things and stuff like that. I know that it wasn't just something out of the corner of my eye. I saw the shape. I've never seen it since then. I don't remember feeling anything negative, but I definitely know that I saw this. And that actually was the first shadow person that I've ever seen. Now, you've actually seen one at Eastern State.
Yeah, I did, but before I get into that, I just wanted to mention that in chat, Susan and Sharon and Horatio, and I'm not sure if there's anybody else, but they're talking about that they heard a whisper at the beginning of the show, or a couple of whispers come through as they were listening to us. So I don't know if you heard anything. I didn't hear anything, I guess because we're too busy talking.
I didn't hear anything either.
But
until I heard the movement.
Yeah, and
that's when I heard it.
That was just towards close to the end of the interview is when you had walked away from the board, from the soundboard. And so I don't know. Maybe we should listen to the show again and check it out to see if we hear anything. And if you guys are listening now and you heard something, shoot us an email at paranormal.review@aol.com, or you can always send us a note on Facebook and let us know. But that's pretty interesting. And yeah, I do remember you telling me the story about the shadow person in your house. You even said that to me that you were reaching out to your mom to find out if it was her or if she could talk to it or whatever it was. I remember you telling me about that. Was a while ago.
Yeah, that was a while. But I mean, that's the only experience I've ever had with the shadow person. I mean, no, I take it back. I have at Eastern State. Down the one corridor, we saw the dark figure moving at the end, but it wasn't really shaped as well. It wasn't defined, but I remember seeing down the first corridor at the end, seeing the shadow kind of move back and forth.
The experience that I had when I was at Eastern State Penitentiary, the first time I was ever at Eastern State Penitentiary, I saw a shadow person, and literally it was a person. I saw the head, the neck, and the shoulders part because it was actually walking across the windows in cell block 12. It was running across from, I can't remember if it was right to left or left to right, but it had walked across and blocked out the light that was coming through, and that's how I was able to see the silhouette of this shadow person, which then that story actually, I was asked to go on the Biography channel and talk about it on Haunted Encounters face-to-face and be on the show. It was a very strange feeling, and it was funny, and I'm not trying to name drop here, but this was when I went to Eastern State the first time. Lucy and I went with Nick, Zach, and Aaron from Ghost Adventures, and I was in cell block 12. This was after the entire group had left, and this was at the end of the night. It was about 2 a.m., and it was just Zach and I in cell block 12, and Aaron was on the lower part underneath cell block 12 in that cell area. And so I first saw that shadow figure person, and the second I said, "Did you just see that?" Zach had said, "I just saw that as well." So it was corroborated, and I knew I wasn't going crazy. I knew I saw something. It wasn't trickery of the eye, and I just stood frozen watching it. It was unreal, and that was the first time I ever really saw a shadow person where I could definitively say that it was a person, that it was not just this blob of mist. And it was an amazing experience. And I wish I had it on film. I did not. I had my camera in my hand, but I was looking around, and I didn't have the camera pointed in the direction of where I was looking, so I did not capture it on film. But I still remember seeing it. I still remember the feeling that I got. It truly was a a long-lasting experience. And nothing was negative that came from it. I wasn't attacked. It didn't do anything. It just glided across. Now, if this was a residual type of spirit that was a black shadow, I don't know. Or if it was an interacting, intelligent type of spirit, again, I don't know that as well. But the figure I did see, and that will be permanently embedded in my mind until I die.
Well, you know what's interesting about it, because cell block 12, where you saw the shadow figure, there's the shower at the end of that cell block, and people have reported, things happening in that shower. I mean, every time we go there, I make a point of going in the shower, sitting there, trying to get contact. And the last time we were there, I'm in the shower, and I definitely it was me and Joanne, and definitely there was a rush of energy that came into the shower and set off the REM pod that we had on the floor. So as far as your experience, I totally believe that there is something that's there that likes to hang out in that area. And I haven't been lucky enough to see it, but I know it's there. I mean, just from the feelings that you get in there. I mean, the whole cell block itself is probably the most active place in the whole location.
Right. It's amazing. It's an amazing place. I'm just trying to go back and try and review the interview that we just had with Jason. And, I still, even with all of the research and the reading that I've done and the YouTube videos that I saw on the shadow people, I still am confused and sort of bewildered at the idea of what is the difference between a darker than night shadow figure and a spirit that we normally see. I'm not too sure. I've heard the idea that darker shadow figures, such as these shadow people, manifest because one, and this comes sort of from a religious theory, that they are demonic in nature, they are evil, and so therefore they don't want to show their true colors, meaning they don't want to show, just like a robber wears a mask when he walks into a bank, they don't want to show who they really are, and that's their cowardness. That's their way of committing but not committing, really. And so they put on this black cloak, so to speak, and hide away. And I get that and I understand that, but I also, too, there are stories of evil or demonic, whatever you want to label them as, showing true form, showing who they are, or creating a representation of something or of someone and not just being a dark silhouette of a figure. So it still just questions, the question is still arising in me as to what is the difference? Why is it? Also, too, how come there's not a purple shadow person, or a red shadow person? I don't know. Maybe I'm silly for questioning that area of it, but I don't know why. That just keeps sticking out of my head as to why is there a difference between the two, and why does one exist while the others exist as well?
Well, I don't think it's silly that you question it. I mean, because this is something that there is no set definition. What's really funny is this week I was, watching a lot of old Dead files, going through, and it just so happened that like almost 3 episodes in a row that I watched, and somebody had mentioned in chat earlier if Amy Allen had what she thought about them. And she mentioned that she thinks that the shadow people are definitely evil. She said that she doesn't know of any way to get rid of them. That's her opinion on the shadow people. But I just thought it was interesting that we're doing this topic, and all of a sudden I watched Dead Files, and there's like 3 episodes that definitely she was talking about shadow people being in each location. And each situation definitely was negative. It was evil.
Yeah, she always says that shadow people are negative. I've never heard her say once that a shadow person, there was a positive experience or a positive feeling, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there ever was.
Again, I'm going with my own experience. I didn't feel like there was anything negative. I didn't feel like there was anything evil. It was almost like someone being curious, trying to go into the other room to see what was going on. But it was very brief, and that was it. So I'm with you on that. I mean, I don't know. I still don't understand what they are. I still don't have a set idea. Going back to the research with from the Native American side, they're definitely looked at as evil. You know, they're the negative. They're the negative forces that are there.
One of the things that I read up on with Native Americans, and I don't have it here. Oof. Okay, I think I remember it. It was Lakota Soy Indian tribe. I think it's Lakota. I think I'm saying that right. Forgive me if I'm saying it wrong, but say it again.
Lakota.
Okay, so then I got it right. Lakota Soy. Am I saying that right? Soy. Sioux. Lakota.
Sioux.
Sioux. SIOUX. Sioux.
Sioux.
Please forgive me.
They're two separate tribes. There's Lakota and there's Sioux.
I've had a long week. Sioux. Thank you, Susan Jackson. Sioux. Okay. So Lakota Sioux Indians, they talked about these shadow people manifesting, coming into being, you know, physical manifestation into a shadow person when there was battle, when there was a fight, I guess, in between two tribes or a tribe and something else. And so these shadow people would come into effect, take on the persona of a warrior, and embed themselves within these Indians to fight this battle and win. And before these warrior tribesmen would come back to camp, there was a ritual in order to remove these shadow entities from them and send them back to wherever they came from, and then these warrior tribesmen would be able to come back into the community and into the camp. And I thought that was an interesting story because I'm not sure if it describes shadow people paranormally. I think what that may mean, and this is just my mind interpreting it, is how we are all good inside. We are all meant to be good and to do good. And in order for a person, you know, within the Native American mindset, in order for a person to have that evil intent, something must take over it. Something must come into the body and take over it and lead in that direction of wanting to kill or wanting to win and to overpower. And in doing so has completed that task. But then in order to come back to quote unquote reality of the community of living on this land, you have to be cleansed of that and to get rid of your negative emotions and your negative feelings. And I don't know if I correlate it to paranormal shadow people, but when I read this story, I was thinking that it could be just that they want to that we are all inherently good and they want to stay good, and you know, in order to do these things that are not good, something has to be called upon to come down and take over and do the bidding for us, and then we have to get rid of it and push it away so that we're clean again and come back to a normal, healthy, positive life. I thought it was just interesting to think of it that way.
Well, I think you're right to a point, but as far as the Native American view, we do all have the good side and we all have the negative side within ourselves. And it's very easy for a man to choose one path or the other. But when you're talking about going into battle, because Native Americans, because we're so involved with our ancestors and their spirits, asking for that strength, asking for that warrior instinct to win that battle. I understand that part of it. I don't know. I don't equate it with the shadow people. I just kind of equate it. It's kind of like almost like a possession, because you're asking the spirits, you're asking the warrior spirits to kind of like reinforce and bolster your side of it. You want to win. You want to overcome your enemies. So you're kind of like moving towards that negative side of you, because that's what's going to win. You want to annihilate your enemies, and that's basically what it is. So before they're coming back to home, yes, you want to clear yourself. You want to clear all that negative energy. You want to clear all of the death that has been around. That part I can see. Shadow people, though, in general, he mentioned watchers, and there's definitely watchers in Native American culture, okay? The one thing that comes to mind, and I'll never forget, is the basement of Bobby Mackey's, okay? Supposedly, Wanda Kay had told us, it was built on burial ground. Well, every burial ground is sacred, okay? There are definitely entities which are called watchers, which watch over that area. And all I can remember from the basement of Bobby Mackey's is sensing something running around. And it definitely wasn't human. I definitely didn't see anything, but I could feel it. I could sense it, and it was moving back and forth. And right after I sensed that, that's when you got scratched.
Yeah.
So, as far as shadow people, I don't know. I really don't know.
Well, Jason had talked about many different characteristics of shadow people. And if you go online, you can always find all sorts of different ways of describing, or, what are they, or, where are they coming from? And, some of the areas that, we talked about tonight, and some of the areas that I have found out, they're either demonic. There's the paranormal factor that they're ghosts or spirits. Mm-hmm. We touched on alien. I think Jason talked about what's called dimensional seepage, where there is this break in between dimensions, and it's sort of, this is a horrible metaphor, but it's sort of like being on an airplane and a piece of the airplane, comes apart and you're just sucked out into the air. It could be that way with this interdimensional seepage, where you're walking down, this, shadow person or this spirit somehow is walking down near this seepage area and is just sucked through into our dimension and just somehow is here. And sort of, I guess explains the reasons why they're watching or they're hiding. I'm trying to put myself in their shoes, or their lack of shoes, but just trying to put myself in their spot, in their predicament. And if that would happen to me, I'm like, okay, where am I? What am I doing? What is that? I don't want them to see me. Should I move away? Should I not? But I do. I want to get out of here. I want to be seen. I want somebody to help me get away from here. So, it could be that. Other sort of explanations have been astral entities, which I have no idea what that means. Do you know what that means?
An astral entity.
Isn't that the same thing as an interdimensional figure?
Yes. Something from a different plane. I mean, we've kind of touched about it on other shows, like with the astral travel. What was it? It was like when you do astral travel, there's certain dimensions that you kind of want to avoid, because the lower level entities are there and they're usually negative. So you kind of want to avoid that during your astral travel. Could shadow people be these lower level entities coming across? I mean, here we go with the interdimensional. Like I said, everything, that web that goes through everything. Could these shadow people be something from another dimension that has slipped through?
Yeah, I'd be interested that, the chat room is a buzz as we're talking, and, Susan and Horatio and Sharon, Trina had spoken before, and talking about the stories and even personal stories about shadow people, and I'm actually comforted in the fact that everybody in chat is talking about it and talking to each other about it. One, because I love that communication. I love people just getting it out there in the open and being so free to communicate either their feelings, their experiences, whatever it is, but getting that communication out. I love it. But I'm interested to hear from folks, if you're not in chat, if you're listening to this on the archives or on YouTube, I'm really interested to hear from you guys if you've got stories that you want to share. I'd love to maybe in the future do just a show just on stories like this. And it doesn't have to be on shadow people, but it could be on anything like that. We've done shows about that before. But I'd love to hear from everybody and get your stories out there if you want to be heard. It's so pivotal and so important for people to be able to communicate those stories that they have held so near and dear to them and not have let out, to be able to communicate that and get that out. It is such, and I know how it feels because I've done it myself, it is such an uplifting experience for someone. And whether or not you feel silly about the story or whether or not you feel as though people are going to think you're crazy, first of all, know that the community that we've created here at Paranormal Review Radio is non-biased, it's non-judgmental in the least. No story is too silly. Well, maybe. Some stories are too silly. Maybe. But we created this show to enforce and encourage people to come out and tell their story, tell their side of things, tell their theories. What do they think? What are their opinions about what they're seeing or feeling or hearing, and what has gone on? Because much of the inner battle that people have within themselves is mostly due to the fact that they have not communicated anything, even from as far back as childhood when things have happened. And that withholding of that experience or that information can take a toll on you physically. It truly does take a toll on you physically. And it changes your personality. It changes your attitude toward things. In some cases, I've known people who have gotten so depressed, they feel alone. And so to be able to communicate that and get that out in the open, if it's not on air live with us, it does not have to be. It could be an email to us or to anyone that you feel comfortable enough to deal with, even down to just writing it down on paper. If you see it on black and white on paper and you don't send it anywhere, you don't, put it in the mailbox, you don't post it on a bulletin board, if you just write it, fold it up, write it, read it. If you want to read it out loud, go right ahead, but then fold it up and put it away somewhere. I think you'll feel a little bit better in the fact that your experience is out there and it's been said, or you've come to the realization that it has happened to you. And the feeling that you are insane or crazy or whatever people may call you or what you call yourself it will diminish, if not completely, at least most of it will go away. And that's the reason why that we do what we do here, and we try to encourage that with people. And so I would love to hear stories. If anybody has shadow people stories, I'd love to hear them. And send us an email. Go on our Facebook page and just post it. We love to read those things. Unfortunately, there's nothing that we can do to help the situation. If you are currently in a situation where you are experiencing something, I myself don't have a cure-all for it. And as you heard tonight, Jason talk about, within the stories that and the interviews that he's had, There's all different types of remedies that he's heard of that has helped. And so there's not one thing that can actually get rid of whatever it is that is infesting your inhabitant or infesting you. And so, we can try and lead you in a direction to possibly get help with someone that, is more of an expert or has more knowledge than we do. But again, we still love to hear those stories and talk about them with you and try and lead you in a direction so that you feel relief, because that's the most important thing. I'm not going to speak for Lucy, but for me, that's the one thing that I love is when people tell their story and that breath comes out and they're so relaxed, because I know that has happened to me earlier on, and as shameful as I felt growing up, and I've told this story before, as shameful as I was about even just trying to and wanting to learn about UFOs and ghosts, people, sort of looked at me with one eye open and one eye closed and thought I was strange and, just thought I was bad in general, which didn't make sense to me at all. But being able then to get with a group of people, and especially when I met up with Lucy, being able to have that connection with someone who understood it, who may not have the answers to it, but actually was able to understand what I was feeling because that other person went through the same thing or something similar. And so, I don't know, I'm just rambling on, but I just wanted to get the point out that I really do love to hear stories from people. I love to read emails. We get a bunch of emails all the time, some just asking for help and what do we do? And, I don't have the answers for everybody, but I can always be an ear and I can always be a shoulder, and same as with Lucy, we can always be that shoulder that you can lean on if there's anything that you just want to get out in the open, because that's the most important thing, I think, first off. That's the biggest battle that a lot of people face when dealing with the paranormal, is just being able to get your story out there.
Well, see, my thing is that I'm happy that we do what we do because it allows people to communicate with others. And the main thing I want to get across to everybody who listens, you are not alone. You are not alone in your experience. When you begin to share and to talk with others who believe or are of the same mindset, you'll be very surprised that you're going to come across someone who may have had the exact same experience. Then you finally realize you're not alone. You're not crazy. You're not this weirdo. The rest of the world is, I like to think the rest of the world is a little bit behind us. I think that we're the paranormal pioneers. I mean, what discoveries, whatever set facts that are going to come through, they're not going to come through science. And we've had this argument before. I think they're going to come from the people who experience. I think they're going to come from us. They're going to come from the people that have an experience and are vocal about it. So even if it's just an email, even if it's just a question, I think that's really important. Now, granted, there are people out there that are just going to try to say something just to get a rise out of somebody or just to get attention. That's not what we're about. I don't think that's what our listeners are about. I'm really, really so amazed at the people that listen to us and the people that are in chat and the people that, interact with us. We're all looking for these answers. And it's through the communication and it's through the sharing of experiences that we're going to find answers. One thing I didn't ask him, and I'm thinking about it now. And if we have people call in, send us experience, I am curious about the situations that are happening before they see the shadow person. Is it just, like you said, one person was just getting out of the shower. I mean, what was going on at that time? I mean, was there something happening in their life that just might have opened up this door, or is it just random? Or those are the kind of things that I'm curious about.
If there's a reason why shadow people are coming down, are they attracted to certain energies, or are they only coming down when we're feeling a certain way or a certain emotion?
Yes, that's what I'd like to find out. I mean, I think that might have some of the answers that we're looking for.
It's an interesting question. I wish you would have thought of that during the interview, but it does correlate to a lot of the other stories within the paranormal, where people have said that even for paranormal investigators, everybody says you should not have negative thoughts or negative feelings. You should, if you're depressed, you should not be walking into a haunted location and doing an investigation, because spirits and entities feed off of that type of energy. Whether or not that's true or not, I can't attest to it. But what's the harm in not having those feelings and trying to rid yourself of negativity before going into a haunted location? What's the harm in doing that? At least your mindset is at a better level. Maybe your awareness is better as well. Maybe you won't get sucked up into the energies, like when I call you the sponge, when the energies sort of feed off of it and just suck the life out of you and suck all of that energy, that maybe there is a legitimate reason why we shouldn't go into locations feeling that way. Or as Trina's talking about now, no alcohol in your system. Obviously no alcohol, no drugs. None of that stuff should be there, because obviously that influences and changes your perception of things, changes your awareness. Not only that, but also too, because you have been weakened, you've left the door sort of ajar and left a little bit open. It allows for these entities and spirits to do what they will. So, could there be something to the fact that we are seeing these entities, whether or not they're shadow people or not, that the frame of mind that we are in at that moment and the way in which that we've been conducting our life, is it sort of creating that beacon and that welcoming to these particular types of spirits? It's a question. I don't have an answer to it, but it's a question to think about. And I think maybe thinking about that along the lines of all the other paranormal phenomena that's out there, Bigfoot, UFOs, all of these strange entities that people talk about, are there instances that we can, I guess, test to see whether or not what was going on during the person's life? And that's what's so important about questioning and interviewing. If you do go and do residential locations, if you investigate residential locations, the foremost important thing that you need to do is psychological and medical testing, but also, too, the interview and the questioning about that particular individual and what's going on in the family, what's going on in the home. That should be the first thing. And then you talk about the history of the land, the history of the house, and all of the incidences. And so that's why it's so important to get into those factors, because all of that can play into finding an answer. But it also is able to, hopefully, if you've kept these records, that maybe somewhere down the line we can pull all of these stories together, if everybody were to get along, and create statistical forms and create all of these hypotheses where if a situation occurs in X, then this has happened, and in how many cases has that happened? And here we've got the backup records to indicate how many of those cases were and what were those details all about. And then here's investigation or hypothesis Y, and here are all the investigations and all the backup to clarify why that happened. I do agree with you. We are the pioneers, and I think we are the ones that are going to find the answers or push the ball forward, push this ball up the hill to get people on board. But I think we need to start doing it in a more legitimate way. It may take the quote unquote fun that people have towards paranormal investigating out of it. But if you're a true believer and you're a true pursuer of the truth, then that's something that I'm hoping people out there listen to and take heed to, and hopefully enforce and create, and have that community come back, because I feel as though it's slipping through our fingers right now.
Well, okay, and this is one thing that we've talked about once before, and what I still think it boils down to your intent. What is in your heart when you go on an investigation, when you are dealing with the paranormal, regardless of what it is. I mean, even if it's Bigfoot, if it's UFO, I think whatever is in your heart, if you go into it with with good intention, with, not looking for that, thrill, not looking for fame or ego, I think that has a lot to do with what you experience and what you're going to learn. Now, I can't speak for everybody, but for me, it definitely makes a difference. When I go on our investigations, what's in my heart, I mean, I try to keep everything clear and open, and it's that sense of compassion for the spirits that are there. I think that's really, really important. And unfortunately, sometimes some of the things that I've seen, I don't believe that it's there. I really don't. I think some people definitely have different agendas when they go forward in investigating.
Everybody's heard of the telephone game. I'm sure they played this when they were younger. I'm sure, Lucy, you may have played this too in the schoolyard. The telephone game where you've got people in a line, and the first person on that line whispers in the other person next to them in their ear and tells them, a sentence or two. And by the time he gets at the end of the line, it's something completely different. And it's always fun to see.
We do this at work every day.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to comment on that. But anyway, so everybody has I'm thinking everybody, or mostly everybody, has played that game. And so at the end of that line, the story is completely different. Sometimes there's something funny that's added to the text of it, or to the story, or the story is completely different. And so I've always had that mindset about all of the research, not all of the research, but all of the writings that there are right now within the paranormal, and within the last 20, 30, 50, maybe even 100 years, about these paranormal topics, whether they're UFO, Bigfoot, spirit, ghost, whatever it is. And I think I may get a little confusing when I'm trying to explain this, but bear with me. And so I think what I tend to do, and Lucy tends to do this as well, because I've sort of trained her in that way, is go back, way back, go further back. We've done this. We've said this before, that we love to, first of all, hit Native American history and the teachings and the writings and the stories, the oral history from them as well, and gather from there and sort of try and work forward. But I also then even go further than that. I go, and even tonight when I brought up the topic, or the question about the Egyptian culture and their ancient Egyptian philosophy, and when I stumbled upon this site about the 5 parts of the human soul, the heart, the name, the soul, the spirit, and the shadow, and when I started to read about the shadow, it was really, really interesting how they described it. And just, again, putting myself in their shoes at that time, in that period of time in history, not really knowing a whole hell of a lot, especially what we know now of the sciences. First of all, the Egyptian culture is amazing to begin with. If you study them and learn everything that they knew, the knowledge that they had, you'd be amazed, and you are amazed at how would they even know all of these things. But anyway, so to me, a lot of the paranormal stories is like playing the telephone game. And so within the last 20, 50, 100 years, that to me is sort of that person that is all the way at the other end of the telephone game, who has heard this story and descriptions have been added or the story has been altered. And what I like to do is go back to the beginning, back to where the first person on that line turned around and whispered the story or the text or whatever it was that they were telling that first person. And I like to go back that far because, not that I believe it more, but it is believable because there's nothing that has been altered in a way or has been, I guess, affected by surroundings or of lately media and whatever else, and getting that picture first and then branching off of that and seeing how that gap and that distance between the first part and these last 20, 50, or 100 years and what that is. And then again, trying to weave the two together to try and formulate a truer answer for me within the paranormal. That's what I like to do. And so doing that, a lot of times it creates a lot more questions, but it actually has opened my eyes so much more and actually has led me into the different paths within the paranormal to connect them together, because it seems as though there's more of a family. If you go back in history, way back in ancient history, to learn about when the first talks of, or if we have right now the first recorded writings or drawings of anything that may be paranormal in nature, how those are a little bit more truer in nature and how they're connected now can lead me to the other areas within the paranormal and connect it to, the Bigfoot sightings and the history of that nature and UFOs and sort of try and connect them all together in some way. I do believe that there is that invisible thread through all of this. There's one answer to it all. I don't know what it is, and I don't know if I'm true. I can't bring up evidence for it. But in my mind, I believe there's one answer for it all. And what that answer is, I have no idea, and I don't think we can actually at this point understand that answer, even if we were given it. I don't think our feeble earthly minds can understand it at this point. But I think there's one answer out there for it all. And so I'm sorry I got off onto that tangent, but I just wanted to explain how that's how I like to do things and how I like to formulate the theories that I come up with. And it's not just upon what we've learned about within the last 100 or even 200 years. I try and go as far back, and as far-fetched as some of them may sound, I still take into consideration.
Well, yeah, and it is true. You have trained me to do my research, to go way back. But that's kind of like why I was really excited about Jason's book, because it's not it's a gathering of different stories. And to me, that's where we need to start. We need to get all this information together that everybody is experiencing and putting it in a book. It's a start. It's a start having all of these things in one spot. And then we can start to make the comparisons. What is the same in each one of these stories? What is different in every one of these stories? And from there, I think that's where the answers come from. So Jason's book to me was very exciting. I was very excited to read it. And I honestly wish there were more things like this. Right now everyone's got their book here and they've got their experiences there, but we need to bring it all together and kind of like, put the cake together and see what's coming up, The
last couple of things on that list is that we were talking about before, possibilities of what shadow people are about. We talked about demonic and paranormal, alien, dimensional seepage, the spirits, astral entities, and the last two on the list is, and we talked about this, time travelers, which I kind of could believe. It is believable, and I've heard stories about certain certain aspects that lead me to believe that they could be time travelers. Whether they are us time traveling or they are other beings time traveling, that I'm not too sure of. And the last one, which is, again, very interesting to me, is the echoes of the self. Echoes of the self. And it goes to this Egyptian thing that I was talking about, on how it is our body cannot exist without the shadow soul. And so this shadow soul is represented by us with our negative thoughts or our negative feelings. And so therefore when we depart from this earthly bound materialistic body, that this shadow soul still exists because it has been created with all of the negative energy that we put into it. And therefore it sort of has to go into the shower and cleanse itself in order for this part of our soul to then move on into the afterlife. And it also correlates to the idea, and again, people think I'm crazy for thinking of this, but I know KO, who I know is in chat right now, understands me because I've talked about this before, that we create our own reality, that we are creating our own death. We are creating our spirit world and our afterlife. And whether or not that is real to others, I think, is a non-existent question or thought. I'm confusing myself as I'm saying this, so if you're getting confused, don't worry. But I think the reality that we're creating for us is within the living itself, and the reality that we're creating afterwards is all of the work that we have created in the reality while we were, quote-unquote, living. And so, yes, there is an afterlife, and some people think this. Yes, there is an afterlife, but it is a picture, a reality television show that you produced and directed yourself. And so you are living in this reality. Now, it doesn't answer the question as to then why do we see spirits? Why does Lucy see a spirit the same as if Susan was in a haunted location and saw the same spirit herself? How could two realities collide together like that? I don't know the answer to that, but I've heard people talk about that, and it correlates to the idea that it echoes the self, that this shadow person is echoing the self. It is a part of you, and it is there, but it is something that you've created in your reality, and your reality now has become real. It's almost like thought form, I think, in a way.
You've just described the toolbox.
Right, right.
I mean, basically, it's a form or an entity that our consciousness has created. I mean, is this what we're seeing? But then again, too, how can several people all see the same thing when you've got a group of people in a location or an area and they all have that same experience? I mean, everyone's truth is their own truth, and if we were to be creating this reality, this thought form, how is it? Is it a group consciousness that is creating this? How do everyone in this group see the same thing or experience the same thing?
It all goes back to energy, I think. It all goes back to energy. We come into this world in the form of energy. We leave this world in the form of energy. Energy has created this world. Energy surrounds us. We give off energy. Things give off energy. I just think it just comes down to that basic idea. It may be so simplistic to say it, but I think there's something to that idea that energy is the essence of who we are, and the soul that we encompass, that we hold within ourselves, is the energy, and that energy is released afterwards. There's nothing tangible about that piece. I believe that wholeheartedly. And so where does that energy go? It has to go somewhere, whether it's here, whether it's in another dimension, whether it is back and forth. who knows? That's the answer that we're all looking for right now. But I think it's an interesting topic. And again, I love how we talk about shadow people tonight, but again, we end up correlating it to a lot of different areas and a lot of different theories. But that's the whole idea of the show, is to not just think shadow people and create these silos within the paranormal and create the divisions that this is separate and that's separate. I just think that it's an open book, and they're all connected somehow in some way. It's just finding what that connection is and finding where that one piece of thread goes through all of them. That's when we're going to find the answer.
Well, one thing that always goes through my mind whenever we talk about anything is that we all base these experiences and we all base what we think we know on us, on our own personal experiences. But yet from the other side, what is that? I mean, could it be possible that this other dimension, this other world exists, and we're getting a glimpse of it, but yet to them, that's their reality, and we are the shadow people, and we're the ghosts, and we're the spirits? I mean, I always think of the other side. What are they seeing? What are they experiencing?
I agree. Well, we've got 4 minutes left. I do want to thank Jason for coming on the show, and thank you all for listening to us tonight. It was an absolutely fantastic show on shadow people. We hope to do this again. Obviously, it's a great topic that people love to talk about, and we can't do it all in 2 hours, but thank you all for joining us. And, Lucy, I think we should get on to the Fan of the Week.
Okay, the Paranormal Review Radio Fan of the Week this week is from YouTube. He comes all the way from Belfast, Ireland. It is Marcus O'Rourke. Marcus listens to us on YouTube. He thinks the shows are pretty good. He sent us a message on our Facebook show page, and he wanted to share some information about the fairy folk in Ireland. We hope to learn more from Marcus soon, and we want to thank him for listening to us over in the green, beautiful country of Ireland.
Yeah, thanks, Marcus. And don't forget, if you want to be a Paranormal Review Radio Fan of the Week, just like us on Facebook, Paranormal Review Radio.
Well, you know what? The mystery of the shadow people remains just that. No answers, but more and more people are reporting what they have seen. And the next time you see something dark in the corner of your eye, look again. You just might be getting a visit from your local shadow person. Make sure you share your experience with someone. You might find someone who has seen or experienced the same thing, and it just might bring us closer to an answer. We want to thank Jason for sharing his stories with us. It was creepy good fun. Hey, have you ever seen the show Ancient Aliens? Well, everyone has at least once. Well, this show investigates the theories that extraterrestrials have been visiting the Earth for millions of years. Pretty interesting stuff. But what if what they are presenting, what if they're presenting something that just isn't true? Aaron Adair is a grad student with degrees in math, physics, and astronomy. He has done work at the Large Hadron Collider at CERN and at the SETI Institute in California. He has published papers on the subject of educational pedagogies, I know I said that wrong, as well as biblical studies in science and religion. Aaron has a different view of the ancient astronaut theories and the sorts of claims that related to modern UFOs and alien visitations. Are things different than what's being presented on television? Join us next Friday night as we talk about Ancient Aliens Debunked. Thank you, everyone, for listening, whether it's live or in the archives. We appreciate every moment that you spend with us. Thank you all. Thank you, Anthony, for being the genius that you are. And if you need proof, just watch our latest promotional video, okay? Until next week, my inquisitive ones, keep your eyes open and have a paranormal week. Good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.
Paranormal Review Radio.